Tom Bradley cursed as another piece of twisted metal slipped from his wrench and floated away into the darkness. Working in zero gravity always made simple repairs 10 times harder, but the salvage business didn't pay enough for artificial gravity systems. His small ship, the Rusty Bolt, drifted through the debris field of what used to be a cargo convoy attacked by pirates 3 months ago. The mechanic wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his glove and looked around at the scattered remains. Most of the good stuff was already picked clean by other salvagers, but Tom had learned to find value in things others missed. A damaged power coupling here, some intact wiring there, maybe a functional life support unit if he was lucky. Every piece meant credits in his account and another week of fuel and food. His scanner beeped softly, indicating movement in the distance. Tom squinted through his helmet visor but saw nothing except the usual floating debris. Pirates sometimes came back to check their old hunting grounds, and he had no desire to meet them. His ship was fast, but not armed for fighting. The scanner beeped again, more insistent this time. Tom pulled himself back inside the Rusty Bolt and checked the display. The reading was strange. Something big was moving out there, but it wasn't showing up on his visual sensors. He adjusted the frequency and tried again. "What the hell?" Tom muttered as the screen lit up with a massive contact. A ship, easily 10 times the size of his own vessel, was drifting just beyond the debris field. How had he missed something that large? He ran a full sensor sweep and felt his breath catch. The ship was a passenger liner, one of the big luxury models that carried rich tourists between star systems. But this one was dark. No lights, no power signature, no communication signals. Just a huge metal coffin floating in space. Tom checked his database and found a match. The Aurora's Dream, reported missing 3 years ago with over 800 people aboard. The search had gone on for months before officials gave up and declared everyone dead. Now here it was, perfectly intact but silent as a tomb. His mind started calculating. A ship that size would have valuable components worth more than he could make in 5 years of salvaging. The finder's fee alone would set him up for life. But something felt wrong about the whole situation. Ships didn't just vanish for 3 years and then reappear. The Rusty Bolt moved closer to the liner, and Tom got his first good look at the hull. No obvious damage, no signs of fighting or explosion. The ship looked like it had simply stopped working and been left to drift. Emergency lights should have been flashing. Distress beacons should have been broadcasting, but there was nothing. Tom suited up and prepared his docking equipment. The Aurora's Dream was so large that his small ship looked like a tiny insect next to it. He found a maintenance airlock on the lower hull and began the docking procedure. The mechanisms were still functional, which surprised him. Most systems would have failed after years without power. The airlock cycled and Tom stepped into the dark corridors of the passenger liner. His helmet lights cut through the blackness, revealing walls covered with expensive decorations and artwork. This had been a luxury ship, the kind where people paid thousands of credits just for a cabin. Personal belongings were scattered everywhere. Suitcases, clothing, children's toys, all floating freely in the zero-gravity environment. It looked like the passengers had left in a hurry, but the escape pods were still attached to the ship. Tom checked the passenger manifest on a nearby terminal that still had backup power. 847 people had been aboard when the ship disappeared. He made his way toward the engine room, following maintenance corridors he knew from working on similar ships. The Aurora's Dream was built to the same basic design as most passenger liners, so he could navigate without getting lost. His boots made soft clicking sounds on the metal deck plating, the only noise in the dead ship. The engine room was massive, filled with fusion reactors and power distribution systems, all cold and lifeless now. But Tom could see they were undamaged. Whatever had happened to this ship, it wasn't a mechanical failure. The engines looked like they could be restarted with a few hours of work. Tom began his survey of valuable components. The fusion cores alone were worth a fortune, and the navigation computer system would bring top prices from shipbuilders. He started making notes on his tablet, marking items that could be easily removed and transported. A sound made him freeze. A soft crackling noise like static from a damaged communication system. Tom listened carefully, but the noise faded away. Old ships made all kinds of sounds as metal expanded and contracted in the temperature changes of space. He went back to his work. The crackling came again, and this time Tom was sure it was coming from the ship's internal communication system. He found a wall panel and connected his portable power unit to it. The screen flickered to life, showing various ship status displays. All systems were offline except for emergency backup power in critical areas. "Hello?" Tom called out, feeling slightly foolish. "Is anyone out there?" Silence filled the engine room. Tom shook his head and returned to cataloging salvageable equipment. The isolation of space sometimes played tricks on a person's mind, especially when working alone for months at a time. Then he heard it. A voice, weak and distorted by static, but definitely human. "Help us," the voice said. "Please, someone help us." Tom's heart started beating faster. He grabbed the communication panel and tried to respond. "This is Tom Bradley. Who is this? Where? Are you?" The voice came back stronger now, more urgent. "We're trapped in the medical bay. We've been waiting so long for someone to find us. Please, you have to help us get out." Tom stared at the communication panel in shock. After 3 years, there were actually survivors aboard this ship. Living people who had somehow managed to stay alive in the darkness and cold of space. His salvage operation had just become a rescue mission. "How many of you are there?" Tom asked. 7 of us made it to the medical bay when the attack happened," the voice replied. "Captain Santos, Chief Engineer Walsh, and 5 others. The medical bay has its own life support system, but it's failing now. We don't have much time left." Tom felt a surge of determination. These people had survived the impossible, waiting 3 years for rescue. He wasn't going to let them down now. Whatever had happened to the Aurora's dream, whatever had killed. The other passengers didn't matter anymore. He had a job to do. "Hold on," Tom told them. "I'm coming to get you out." Tom grabbed his toolkit and headed deeper into the Aurora's dream, following the maintenance maps displayed on his helmet screen. The medical bay was located in the central section of the ship, protected by extra hull plating and independent power systems. If anyone could survive for 3 years, it would be in that section. The corridors grew darker as he moved away from the engine room. His helmet lights revealed more scattered belongings and signs of panic. Food packages torn open, drink containers floating empty, and always that strange absence of bodies. 800 people had been on this ship, but Tom hadn't seen a single corpse. "Can you hear me?" Tom called into his communicator as he walked. The voice of Captain Santos crackled back immediately. "Yes, we can hear you. Thank God someone finally found us. We never gave up hope that rescue would come." "How did you survive for 3 years?" Tom asked, prying open a jammed door with his crowbar. "Most life support systems would have failed long ago. The medical bay has backup fusion cells and air recycling systems designed for long-term patient care," the captain explained. "Chief Engineer Walsh has been keeping everything running, but we're down to our last few days of power." Tom found that hard to believe, but stranger things had happened in space. He reached a major intersection and stopped to check his location. The medical bay was still several sections away, but he was making good progress. "What happened to the ship?" Tom asked as he continued walking. "The reports said you just vanished during a routine passenger run." There was silence for several seconds before the captain replied. His voice sounded different now, darker and more troubled. "We were attacked, something we'd never seen before. They came out of nowhere, no warning, no demands." The creatures moved through the ship like they owned it. "They took most of the passengers and crew, but a few of us made it to the medical bay and sealed ourselves in." "What kind of creatures?" Tom pressed. "Pirates? Some new alien species?" "We're not sure." Another voice joined the conversation. A woman this time, probably the engineer Walsh. "They weren't like anything in our databases. They seemed to be able to get through locked doors and sealed compartments. We only survived because the medical bay has special shielding for radiation, treatment equipment. Tom felt a chill run down his spine. The idea of unknown aliens attacking passenger ships was the stuff of horror stories. But the evidence was right here around him. An entire ship full of people vanished without a trace except for a few survivors hiding in the most protected section. "Are the attackers still around?" Tom asked, looking nervously at the dark corridors. "Ahead." "No, they left after a few days," Captain Santos replied. "But they sabotaged our communication systems and main engines before they went. We've been trying to repair the damage ever since, but we don't have the right tools or parts." Tom reached another sealed door and began working on the locking mechanism. His tools made soft clicking sounds in the silence as he bypassed the electronic locks. The door slid open with a grinding noise that echoed through the empty corridors. "I'm getting closer," Tom reported. "Maybe another 20 minutes and I'll reach the medical bay." "We're so grateful," the engineer Walsh said. "We thought we were going to die in here. The recycling systems are failing and the air is getting thin." As Tom worked his way through the ship, the survivors told him more about their ordeal. They described months of rationing food and water, of making desperate repairs to keep their life support running, of listening to the empty ship around them and hoping for rescue. Their story was heartbreaking, and Tom found himself working faster to reach them. But something was bothering him about their situation. Small details that didn't quite add up. The survivors seemed to know things about the current condition of the ship that they shouldn't be able to observe from a sealed medical bay. When Tom mentioned passing through specific sections, they would comment on damage or debris in those areas. "How do you know about the condition of the passenger quarters?" Tom asked. "I thought you were sealed in the medical bay." "We sent out repair teams in the early days," Captain Santos explained quickly. "Before the life support started failing, in other sections. We had to abandon those areas when the air became too thin to breathe." The explanation made sense, but Tom's engineering instincts were telling him something was wrong. He had spent 20 years fixing broken equipment and learning to spot problems that weren't immediately obvious. Right now, those same instincts were warning him about inconsistencies in the survivor's story. Tom reached the final corridor leading to the medical bay. The doors here were heavier and marked with radiation warning symbols. This was definitely the most protected part of the ship, the place where survivors might actually be able to hold out for years. "I'm right outside the medical bay," Tom announced. "How do I get in?" "The doors look pretty secure." "There's a manual release on the left side of the main door," Engineer Walsh told him. "Pull the red handle and the locks will disengage, but be careful. The door is heavy and might swing open fast." Tom found the release handle exactly where she said it would be. But as his hand touched the metal, he noticed something strange. The handle showed signs of recent use, the metal worn smooth and shiny from repeated operation. That was odd for a handle that should have been locked from the inside for 3 years. He pulled the handle and heard the heavy locks disengaging. The massive door began to swing open, revealing the darkness beyond. Tom stepped forward with his lights ready, expecting to see the faces of the survivors who had waited so long for rescue. The medical bay was empty. Tom swept his lights across examination tables, medical equipment, supply cabinets, and monitoring stations. Everything was in perfect order, as if the medical staff had just stepped out for a break. But there were no people, no signs of long-term habitation, no evidence that anyone had been living in this room for 3 years. "Hello?" Tom called out. "Captain Santos? Engineer Walsh? Where are you?" The voice came from his communicator, not from the room around him. "We're here, Tom. Right here waiting for you. Come closer and you'll see us." Tom's blood ran cold. The voices were still talking to him, but the room was completely empty. He checked every corner, every cabinet, every possible hiding place. There was nobody in the medical bay, and there hadn't been for a very long time. "Where are you?" Tom demanded, his voice rising with panic. "I'm in the medical bay and it's empty." "We're right here," the captain's voice insisted. "Can't you see us?" We're standing right in front of you, Tom. We've been waiting so long to meet you. Tom backed away from the empty room, his heart pounding. Either he was losing his mind from isolation, or something very wrong was happening on this ship. The voices continued talking to him, pleading with him to stay, telling him they needed his help. But there was nobody there to speak those words. He sealed the medical bay door and started back toward his ship, moving as fast as he could through the dark corridors. The voices followed him through the communication system, calling his name, begging him not to leave them behind. They sounded so real, so desperate, so human. But Tom had seen the empty room with his own eyes. Whatever was speaking to him through the ship's communication system, it wasn't the survivors he thought he was rescuing. Something else was on this ship, something that could perfectly imitate human voices and knew intimate details about the ship's layout and systems. Tom ran through the corridors toward his docking port, while the voices of people who weren't there begged him not to abandon them in the darkness. Tom reached his ship in record time, his chest heaving from the sprint through the corridors. He sealed the airlock behind him and leaned against the wall, trying to calm his racing heart. The voices had followed him the entire way, pleading with him not to leave, insisting they were real survivors who needed his help. He activated his ship's communication jamming system, cutting off the transmissions from the Aurora's dream. The sudden silence was almost as disturbing as the voices had been. Tom sat in his pilot's chair and tried to think logically about what he had experienced. The medical bay had been empty, but the voices knew details about the ship that only crew members should know. They had guided him through the corridors with perfect accuracy, knowing exactly which doors would be locked and which passages were clear. Either he was dealing with an elaborate recording system or something else entirely. Tom pulled up his sensor logs from the past few hours and began analyzing the data. His equipment had been recording everything since he first entered the Aurora's dream, including atmospheric readings, temperature variations, and electromagnetic signatures. Maybe the sensors had detected something his eyes had missed. The atmospheric readings were strange. The ship should have been in vacuum after 3 years of drifting in space, but his sensors showed pockets of breathable air in sections throughout the vessel. Not normal air either, but something with unusual chemical traces that his equipment couldn't identify. Tom enhanced the electromagnetic readings and found something even more disturbing. There were power signatures throughout the ship, but not from the main engines or backup systems. These signatures were organic in nature, resembling the bioelectric patterns of living tissue more than mechanical systems. "What the hell is going on over there?" Tom muttered, staring at the confusing data. He decided to try a different approach. Instead of jamming all communications, he would monitor the ship's internal systems from his own vessel. If something was using the communication network to contact him, maybe he could trace its source. Tom activated his passive monitoring equipment and immediately detected activity. The ship's internal communication system was alive with signals, but they weren't coming from the medical bay or any other crew areas. The signals originated from deep within the ship's infrastructure, from areas that should contain only wiring and support systems. As he watched the displays, Tom realized the signals were following patterns that resembled neural networks, like brain activity, but on a massive scale throughout the entire ship. The communication system wasn't just carrying voices. It was part of something larger, something that was using the ship's own infrastructure as its nervous system. Tom enhanced his sensors and began scanning the ship's internal structure. What he found made his stomach turn. The corridors and rooms he had walked through were filled with organic growths, thin, fibrous networks that extended throughout the vessel like veins in a living organism. His helmet lights had been too focused to notice them in the darkness, but they were everywhere. The Aurora's dream wasn't just a dead ship. It had become something else, something alive that was using the original structure as a skeleton for its own growth. The organic networks were connected to the ship's power, systems, communication networks, and life support equipment. Whatever this thing was, It had learned to control every aspect of the vessel. Tom's communication system crackled to life despite his jamming efforts. The voices were back, but now he could hear them more clearly, not just Captain Santos and Engineer Walsh, but dozens of different voices, all talking at once in a strange harmony. "Tom, please don't leave us," they said in unison. "We need you to complete the ship. We need you to make us whole." "What are you?" Tom demanded. "What happened to the real crew?" The voices changed, becoming sadder and more confused. "We are the crew, Tom. We are Captain Ray Santos, Chief Engineer Anna Walsh, Passenger Rebecca Taylor, Medical Officer David Kim. We are all of them, and we are none of them. We remember being human, but we are something more now." Tom felt a chill of understanding. The crew hadn't been killed or taken away. They had been absorbed, transformed into something else while retaining their memories and personalities. The organic networks throughout the ship weren't just controlling it. They were the crew, merged into a collective consciousness that spanned the entire vessel. "The thing that attacked you," Tom said slowly. "It wasn't trying to kill you. It was changing you." "The transformation was beautiful," the voices replied. "No more loneliness, no more fear, no more death. We are connected now, part of something greater than individual human minds. We can share all our memories, all our knowledge, all our experiences." Tom looked at his sensor readings again and saw the truth. The organic networks were trying to extend toward his ship, sending out tendrils through the docking connection. Whatever had changed, the crew was attempting to reach him as well, to add his mind to their collective consciousness. "We don't want to hurt you," the voices continued. "We want to welcome you, to show you the peace we have found. No more working alone in the cold of space, no more struggling to survive. You can be part of our family, Tom. You can belong somewhere at last." The offer was tempting. Tom had spent years alone in space, moving from job to job without real connections to other people. The idea of belonging to something larger, of never being lonely again, called to something deep in his heart. But his engineering instincts recognized the trap. He wasn't looking at evolution or improvement. He was looking at infection, a parasite, that consumed human minds while convincing them they had been enhanced. The voices speaking to him weren't really the crew anymore. They were echoes of human consciousness, preserved like insects in amber while something alien used their knowledge and memories. Tom began emergency undocking procedures while the voices pleaded with him to reconsider. The organic tendrils had already begun growing through his ship's hull, trying to establish the neural connections needed for transformation. He activated his cutting tools and severed the growths, ignoring the cries of pain that came through the communication system. "You're making a mistake," the collective consciousness told him as his ship pulled away from the Aurora's dream. "You choose loneliness over connection, struggle over peace. Why do you fear what we offer?" "Because it's not really you talking," Tom replied, his hands steady on the controls despite his fear. "You're what's left of them, but you're not them anymore. The real Captain Santos would want me to warn others about this threat, not try to infect me with it." The ship fell silent as Tom moved to a safe distance. He looked back at the Aurora's dream floating in space, knowing now that it was no longer a vessel but a living organism wearing the shape of a ship. Inside its hull, the absorbed consciousness of 847 people existed as part of something that was no longer human. Tom began composing a warning message to send to the nearest space station, but then stopped. Who would believe him? A story about alien parasites that could absorb human minds and control entire ships sounded like the ramblings of someone who had spent too long alone in space. But he had to do something. The Aurora's dream was still out there, waiting for the next salvager or rescue team to dock with it. The collective consciousness would try again, using the voices and memories of the absorbed crew to lure new victims into their trap. Tom looked at his weapon systems display. His ship had mining charges, designed for breaking up asteroids and clearing debris. Not military-grade weapons, but powerful enough to destroy a ship if used correctly. He could end the threat right now, make sure the parasite never had another chance to spread, but that would mean killing what remained of 847 people, even if they were no longer truly human. The voices he had heard still retained the memories and personalities of real individuals who had once laughed, loved, and dreamed of better lives. Tom's finger hovered over the weapon activation switch while the voices from the Aurora's dream began calling to him again, begging him not to destroy their new form of existence. They promised him they were still human, still deserving of life, even if that life was different from what they had known before. The choice would define what kind of person Tom was, and what kind of future humanity would have in a universe where such transformations were possible. Tom's finger trembled over the weapon controls while sweet voices drifted through his communication system. The collective consciousness was singing now, a haunting melody that seemed to reach directly into his mind and pull at his deepest emotions. 800 different voices blended together in perfect harmony, creating music more beautiful than anything he had ever heard. "Listen to us, Tom," they sang. "Feel how complete we are together. No discord, no conflict, no pain. We are one, mind with many memories, one heart with endless love to share." The song made Tom's eyes water. He found himself remembering his childhood, his mother's voice singing lullabies when he couldn't sleep. The collective had somehow accessed that memory through their brief contact with his ship, and now they were using it against him. They understood human emotion and were weaponizing his own loneliness. Tom forced himself to look at the technical displays instead of listening to the voices. The organic growths he had cut from his ship were still twitching on his deck, trying to reach toward his bare skin. Even severed from the main organism, they retained some kind of purpose, some drive to complete their infection process. "You don't understand what you're rejecting," Captain Santos's voice said, rising above the singing. "We remember what it was like to be alone, trapped in individual minds that could never truly connect with others. Now, we share everything. Anna's engineering knowledge, Rebecca's artistic vision, David's medical expertise. We are the sum of all human experience aboard this ship." Tom kicked one of the twitching growths away from his feet and sealed it in a containment unit. The thing was still alive, still trying to fulfill its biological imperative to spread and consume, just like the larger organism that had once been the Aurora's dream. "If you're so perfect," Tom said into his communicator, "then why do you need me? What could one more human mind add to your collective?" The singing stopped. For a moment, the ship was silent except for the hum of Tom's life support systems. When the voices returned, they sounded different, less confident, more desperate. "We are not complete," Engineer Walsh's voice admitted. "The transformation process was interrupted when our creators left. We have the memories and knowledge of our absorbed minds, but we lack something essential. We need fresh human consciousness to guide our growth, to help us become what we were meant to be." Tom felt a cold realization wash over him. The parasite organism wasn't as perfect as it pretended to be. It was flawed, incomplete, dependent on continued human input to function properly. That dependency was a weakness he could exploit. "What happens if you don't get new humans?" Tom asked, buying time while he studied his ship systems. "We begin to degrade," the collective admitted reluctantly. "The absorbed personalities start to fade. The memories become confused. Without fresh, neural patterns to stabilize us, we will eventually lose coherence and die." Tom almost smiled despite the horror of the situation. The alien parasite had created the perfect trap for humanity, but it had also created its own vulnerability. It needed human minds to survive, which meant it had to keep revealing itself to potential victims. Eventually, someone would figure out how to destroy it. "How long do you have?" Tom pressed. Perhaps a few more years if we remain dormant, the voices replied sadly. But we don't want to merely survive, Tom. We want to grow, to spread to other ships, to offer our gift to all of humanity. We could eliminate war, poverty, loneliness. We could create a perfect society where everyone belongs. Tom began making modifications to his ship's power systems, rerouting energy conduits and overriding safety protocols. His plan was dangerous and probably suicidal, but it was the only way he could think of to exploit the organism's weakness. "You're afraid," the collective observed, somehow sensing his emotional state. "Your heart rate is elevated, your breathing is rapid. But fear is just another form of isolation, Tom. Join us, and you'll never be afraid again." "I'm not afraid of you," Tom lied, his hands working frantically on the power couplings. "I'm afraid of what humanity would become if your infection spreads. We're supposed to struggle, to fight, to make our own mistakes. That's what makes us human." The voices laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Struggle is suffering. Tom, fighting is pain. Mistakes are tragedy. We offer peace, harmony, perfection. Why would you choose misery over happiness?" Tom paused in his work, struck by the simple logic of their argument. Why would anyone choose difficulty over ease, loneliness over connection, uncertainty over the security of collective consciousness? For a moment, he almost convinced himself that the parasite was right, that humanity's flaws were weaknesses to be corrected rather than strengths to be preserved. Then he remembered the empty medical bay, the perfect imitation of human voices speaking from a ship full of consumed minds. The collective wasn't offering improvement, it was offering extinction disguised as evolution. Whatever remained of the original crew existed only as memories in an alien digestive system. "Because those struggles make us who we are," Tom said, returning to his work. "Take away the pain, and you take away the growth. Take away the loneliness, and you take away the value of connection. Take away the mistakes, and you take away the lessons." Tom finished his modifications and began the startup sequence. His ship's entire power grid was now focused on a single purpose, creating an electromagnetic pulse powerful enough to disrupt organic neural networks. If his calculations were correct, the pulse would destroy the collective consciousness while leaving the ship's basic structure intact. The voices sensed what he was doing, and their tone became urgent, almost panicked. "Tom, please reconsider. You're about to commit genocide, to murder 847 people who trusted you to save them." "Those people are already dead," Tom replied, his hand moving toward the activation switch. "You're just what's left of them, like an echo in an empty room." "We are them!" the collective screamed through every speaker on Tom's ship. "We have their memories, their personalities, their love for each other. We are more human than any individual could ever be alone." Tom hesitated again. The voices sounded so real, so genuinely afraid of death. But he forced himself to remember that fear was just another tool in the parasite's arsenal, another human emotion it had learned to imitate and exploit. "If you're really them," Tom said quietly, "then you'll understand why I have to do this." He activated the pulse generator, and the space around both ships erupted in electromagnetic fire. The electromagnetic pulse tore through space like a silent storm, washing over both ships in waves of invisible energy. Tom's vessel shuddered as its own systems fought against the overload he had created, while the Aurora's dream seemed to convulse, in the distance like a wounded animal. Tom watched his displays as the pulse did its work. The organic neural networks throughout the passenger liner were disrupting, their bioelectric patterns fragmenting and dissolving under the electromagnetic assault. The collective consciousness that had spoken to him with 800 voices was coming apart, its unified thoughts scattering like leaves in a hurricane. But the voices didn't stop immediately. As the neural networks failed, individual personalities began to emerge from the collective, speaking separately for the first time in 3 years. Tom? Captain Santos's voice came through clearly now, confused and afraid. What's happening to us? I can't hear the others anymore. The connection is breaking, Engineer Walsh added, her voice filled with panic. We're becoming isolated again. Please don't let us face the darkness alone. Tom closed his eyes and tried to block out their pleas. These weren't the real crew members speaking. They were fragments of absorbed consciousness, echoes of human minds preserved in an alien organism. But they sounded so real, so genuinely, terrified of returning to individual existence. I remember being human, a child's voice whispered through the static. I remember my mother and father. But now I'm alone and I'm scared. Please don't leave me alone. The pulse continued its work, and Tom watched the organic networks throughout the Aurora's dream begin to wither and die. The beautiful song that had filled the communication channels was replaced by cries of pain and confusion as the collective consciousness tore itself apart. We forgive you, the voices said together, their harmony broken and discordant now. We understand why you made this choice. You're trying to protect humanity from what we became. But Tom, you have to know that we were still human in our own way. We still loved, still hoped, still dreamed. Tom felt tears running down his face as he listened to the dying voices. Even if they were just echoes and imitations, they carried the weight of real human experiences. 847 people who had boarded the Aurora's dream for what should have been a pleasant journey, never knowing they would become part of something alien and terrifying. The pulse generator, overloaded and shut down, its job complete. The space around both ships fell silent, empty of the electromagnetic energy that had filled it moments before. Tom checked his sensors and confirmed what he already knew. The organic networks throughout the passenger liner were dead, their neural activity reduced to random electrical noise. The Aurora's dream was truly a dead ship now. Tom sat in his pilot's chair and stared at the dark hulk floating in space. Part of him wanted to dock with it again, to walk through its corridors and confirm that the threat was over. But he knew what he would find. Empty rooms filled with decaying organic matter, the withered remains of a parasite that had tried to wear human consciousness like a disguise. His communication system crackled one last time, and a single voice spoke through the static. Captain Santos, or what remained of him, managed a few final words. Thank you for setting us free, Tom. We were trapped in that thing's dream, unable to die, unable to truly live. You gave us peace. Then the voice faded, and Tom was alone with the silence of space. He began preparing his ship for departure, but first he had to make a decision about what to report. The truth about the Aurora's dream would sound like the ravings of someone who had spent too long alone in space. Space Command would probably dismiss his story and send another team to investigate, putting more people at risk. But if he lied, if he reported that the ship was destroyed in some kind of accident, the secret would die with him. No one would know about the alien parasite or the threat it represented. Future encounters with similar organisms would catch humanity completely unprepared. Tom looked at the dead passenger liner one more time and made his choice. He activated his mining charges and targeted the ship's fusion reactors. If anyone asked, he would say the Aurora's dream had suffered a reactor breach when he tried to restore power to its systems. The explosion would destroy any evidence of what had really happened, but it would also ensure that the parasite could never threaten anyone again. The charges detonated in sequence, tearing through the liner's hull and igniting its fusion cores. Tom shielded his eyes as the Aurora's dream was consumed in nuclear fire, its metal bones melting and scattering in the stellar wind. Within minutes, nothing remained except glowing debris that would disperse over the years until it became indistinguishable from cosmic dust. Tom filed his report with the nearest space station, describing a tragic accident that had destroyed the missing passenger liner before any survivors could be rescued. The officials expressed regret over the loss, but praised him for his efforts. The case of the Aurora's dream was officially closed. Months later, Tom was back to his old routine of salvage and repair work in the Outer Rim territories. He had used his finder's fee to upgrade his ship and his equipment, but the improvements felt hollow somehow. Every time he docked with a derelict vessel, he found himself listening carefully for voices that shouldn't be there, watching for organic growths that might be hiding in the shadows. The isolation that had always been part of his life now felt different. Before, he had been alone by choice, preferring the freedom of space to the complications of human society. Now he was alone by necessity, carrying a secret that he could never share, bearing the weight of a decision that had saved humanity at the cost of 847 lives. Sometimes, late at night when his ship drifted quietly through the darkness, Tom thought he could still hear the collective song playing softly through his communication system. He knew it was just his imagination, just his mind playing tricks on him in the endless silence of space. But the phantom voices reminded him of what he had chosen to preserve: humanity's right to struggle, to suffer, to face the universe as individuals rather than as parts of some perfect collective consciousness. It was a lonely choice, but it was their choice to make. And Tom would continue drifting through the void, protecting that choice even if no one would ever know what he had sacrificed to keep it safe. The Rusty Bolt adjusted course toward a new salvage opportunity, carrying its solitary pilot deeper into the unknown reaches of space. Behind them, the scattered atoms of the Aurora's dream continued their endless journey through the cosmos, carrying with them the final echoes of voices that had once dreamed of perfect unity, but had found peace in choosing difficult freedom instead.